My name is Beverly. Standing in my kitchen, I'm surrounded by a tense atmosphere. My mother, Mrs. Thompson, is arguing with Officer Diaz, while my father, Mr. Thompson, looks on with a mix of guilt and resignation. 2 weeks ago, 3 hard knocks on my front door changed everything. I work as an antiques authenticity expert in Charleston. My job is to uncover the truth hidden in the papers of valuable antiques, and little did I know that I'd soon apply the same skills to my own family. On my wedding day, I stared at 4 empty chairs meant for my family. My parents and younger sister, Lily, didn't show up. 30 minutes before the ceremony, my mother sent a message saying, "Some events force us to take sides. We've made our choice." Then, I started getting notifications on my phone as she deleted every childhood photo of me from the online family album. My fiancé, Ethan, took the phone from my hand before I could read more. Despite the pain, I married Ethan, surrounded by those who truly supported me. The next morning at 7:12, as if nothing had happened, my mother texted me. "I need $8,600 for Lily's wedding deposit. Send it before noon. Don't bring shame to this family." She also threatened to tell our relatives that Ethan had manipulated me into leaving them if I refused. I was furious. I transferred $1 and wrote in the memo, "Payment for the seat you left empty." Then, I canceled the monthly $1,200 transfer I had been sending to my parents for 6 years. My parents' financial situation started going downhill when my father's furniture business began losing clients. My mother created an account called the Thompson Family Reserve and convinced me to contribute. She said the money would cover property taxes, medical bills, and emergencies. I believed her because being useful to my family was the closest I got to their love. I never questioned her much. She always reminded me that she had fed me, clothed me, and sent me to college. What she didn't mention was that I had earned scholarships, worked nights at an antique shop, and paid off my student loans on my own. Lily, who was 27 and had changed her wedding plans multiple times in a year, was never asked to contribute. According to my mother, she was still finding her way. After my wedding, my mother didn't even ask if I was happy. She only demanded the money because Lily wanted a deposit for a beachfront wedding venue. The venue was available for only 48 hours, and she sent me a screenshot of the payment page, saying, "You owe her a perfect wedding after stealing the spotlight with your small ceremony." I was in shock. My wedding was a simple affair with 42 guests in an old barn. We served local food and used borrowed tables, paying for everything ourselves. My mother called it cheap, yet she expected me to pay for a much more expensive venue. When I refused, she sent a series of messages. First, she tried to make me feel guilty, saying, "Lily cried all night because of you." Then, she changed her story, "We skipped your wedding because Ethan's family made us feel unwelcome." This was a lie. Ethan's parents had sent them handwritten invitations and offered to arrange transportation. Finally, she threatened Ethan's job. People should know what kind of man isolates a daughter from her family. His employer might be interested. Ethan worked as a structural engineer for a local construction company, and his reputation was crucial. That's when I decided to fight back. I stopped replying and started documenting. At work, I was used to examining forged provenance files. I downloaded 6 years of statements from the Thompson Family Reserve. The account was in my name because of my good credit, but my mother had access. I expected to see legitimate expenses, but instead, I found luxury hotel stays, high-end clothing purchases, payments to a wedding planner, and recurring transfers to an account ending in 6789. Over the past 18 months, more than $37,000 had disappeared. The most recent withdrawal was $8,600, taken 3 days before my wedding and then reversed due to insufficient documentation. I realized my mother was trying to make me replace the money she had already misappropriated. That night, I started writing a letter I never intended to send. "Dear Mom, you taught me that records are only important when they protect you. My job taught me they matter most when someone wants to hide the truth. I didn't send the letter. Instead, I canceled my mother's access to the account, froze outgoing transfers, changed all the passwords, and informed the bank that future requests needed my physical signature. Then, I discovered something even worse. The contact email for the account had been changed 4 months ago to an address in my name that I had never created. Someone had been pretending to be me and receiving account notices. I called the bank's fraud department and learned that a request had been submitted to add Lily as a co-owner. The scanned signature on the request looked like mine from a distance, but up close, I recognized my mother's handwriting. I knew the $8,600 demand was not the start of the scheme but the moment it was falling apart. Before going to bed, I saved all the evidence in 3 different places and told Ethan what I had found. He didn't tell me to forgive them or calm down. He simply asked, "How far do you think she'll go to keep this hidden?" 2 weeks later, the answer came in the form of my mother standing at my front door with 2 police officers and a folder labeled family fraud. She was confident until I opened my own file. Her face turned pale as I presented the evidence. I invited the officers into the kitchen. I showed them the original account agreement, proving that I opened the account with my own salary and was the sole legal owner. I also presented 6 years of direct deposits from my personal checking account, showing that there were no contributions from my parents. I divided the withdrawals into 3 categories. The first included legitimate expenses like property tax and insurance. The second was full of questionable personal spending, such as spa treatments and designer clothes. The third category was the transfers to the account ending in 6789, which I proved belonged to my mother. When I presented the forged co-owner form with my copied signature, my mother started to panic. She tried to blame Lily and then my father. My father, who had been in the car, came in looking like he had just realized the gravity of his actions. My mother still tried to defend herself. "She gave us that money. It's a gift and can't be taken back." Officer Diaz explained that revoking access to an account was not theft, but filing a false complaint, submitting falsified documents, and impersonating an account holder were serious crimes. My mother then pulled out a printed email allegedly written by me, threatening to destroy Lily's wedding and make her homeless. But I had already obtained the login history, which showed that every access to that email originated from my parents' address. I handed the report to Officer Diaz, and she asked if I wanted to make a formal complaint. I said yes. After the officers left, my father returned alone. He placed a sealed envelope on the table and said, "Your mother isn't the only one who lied to you." Inside was a photograph from 10 years ago, a canceled check for $24,000 issued from a trust my grandmother had set up for me, and evidence that the betrayal had started long before my wedding. My father admitted that the trust was supposed to help me open an antique restoration studio after graduation. My mother had told him I agreed to lend them the money because their business was failing. He believed her because of a forged email in my name. They used the money to pay off tax debt and send Lily to a private art school. When I later asked why my grandmother had left me nothing, my mother said the medical bills had consumed the estate. I now realized my father had known something was wrong. He knew the signature on the check didn't look right, but he chose to stay silent because the money solved their problem. My mother returned and saw the canceled check on the table. Instead of apologizing, she said, "You had no right to show her that." I opened the letter I had written and read, "Every time you called me selfish, you were standing on what you took from me." She laughed, but it was a brittle laugh. She said parents make sacrifices children don't understand and that the trust money had benefited me by keeping a roof over everyone's head. I reminded her that I was already living in student housing and paying my own rent when they cashed the check. She then changed her story, saying my grandmother was mentally confused and shouldn't have left me more than Lily. According to her, taking the money was correcting an injustice. Ethan asked her to leave, but she ignored him and turned to me, saying Ethan was poisoning me against the family, just like my college boyfriend, Tom, had tried to do. This made me pause. Years ago, Tom, a history major, encouraged me to take an internship in New York. A week before I was supposed to leave, he ended the relationship via email, saying I was too dependent on my family. I was heartbroken and declined the internship. My mother had spent months telling me that ambitious men would always abandon me. Now, as she mentioned Tom, I noticed the same satisfaction in her voice. I asked how she knew Tom objected to my family. His breakup email never mentioned them. My mother froze, and my father's silence spoke volumes. I later learned that she had called Tom, pretending to be concerned about my mental health. She told him I had severe debt, unstable moods, and a history of lying. Then, she accessed my email, sent the breakup message to herself, deleted his replies, and convinced me he had left. She did it because the internship would have taken me away when they needed someone with good credit for a business loan. Just then, Lily called my father's phone. He accidentally answered on speaker. She asked, "Did Beverly find the trust check?" The room went silent. Lily knew about the betrayal. I told my mother that all the documents would go to the bank investigator and my attorney. I wouldn't create a public scene, but I would no longer protect her from the consequences of her actions. She warned that if I exposed the trust, my father could lose his remaining business contracts and Lily's wedding would be ruined. I replied, then they should know what their comfort cost. The next morning, Lily requested a private meeting. We met at a small coffee shop on the outskirts of the city. She arrived 20 minutes late, wearing big sunglasses even though we were inside. Before sitting down, she asked if I was recording the conversation. I said no, but my attorney had advised me to document future contact. She rolled her eyes and said, "That's exactly what Mom means. You're turning a family matter into a criminal case." She started by saying our mother was difficult, but I was overreacting because no one had personally profited from the trust money. I reminded her that part of it paid for her school. She said she was 19 at the time and didn't know where the money came from. I asked when she learned the truth. At first, she said a few years ago, but after more questions, it turned out to be 4 years. She had discovered the check while helping my mother scan documents for a mortgage application. When she confronted my mother said the money belonged equally to both of us. Instead of telling me, Lily accepted another $12,000 for a failed clothing store. She said she felt trapped because my mother had warned her that revealing the truth would destroy our father, leave them homeless, and make me hate her. I asked if she ever considered that staying silent might also make me hate her. She started crying, but the tears couldn't erase the fact that she knew I was sending money every month, that the family skipped my wedding because I refused to guarantee another loan, and that my mother planned to demand the $8,600 the next morning. Lily then offered a deal. If I withdrew the complaint and restored enough money to secure the wedding venue, she would persuade our mother to acknowledge the trust privately. I asked if this included repayment. She said it was unrealistic. I also asked if it included a public correction to the relatives who were told Ethan was isolating me. She said it would humiliate our mother. I stood up and told her I loved the sister I remembered, but I couldn't finance the person she had become. I wouldn't pay for her wedding, hide the forged documents, or communicate with her until she could take responsibility without bargaining. She called me vindictive, and I left $20 for the coffee and walked out. That night, I added another paragraph to my unsent letter. I always thought we were in the same prison, but today I learned you had the key and chose not to tell me. 3 days later, Lily forwarded me an invitation to a family meeting. Our mother claimed to have proof that would end my marriage, destroy my complaint, and explain why I never truly belonged in the Thompson family. I almost deleted it, but then I noticed the attachment, a copy of my birth certificate with one line blacked out. The meeting took place at my parents' house on a Sunday afternoon. Ethan came with me, but we drove separately. I also notified Officer Diaz that my mother had contacted me again. When we arrived, my mother had arranged chairs in a semicircle, like she was hosting an intervention. My father looked exhausted, sitting near the fireplace. Lily was sitting beside her fiancé, Mark, a real estate agent who only knew that I was refusing to release family inheritance money. Two of my mother's sisters and our oldest cousin were also there. My mother started by saying I had attacked the family because I resented Lily and had identity issues. Then, she announced that the man on my birth certificate was not my biological father. She claimed she had protected me from this truth for all these years and that the trust from my grandmother was never mine because I wasn't part of the Thompson bloodline. I asked if my grandmother knew about my parentage. My mother said yes. I showed a copy of the trust language, which identified me by my full legal name, date of birth, and social security number. It also included a handwritten letter from my grandmother saying the funds were for my education and future studio. My father then spoke up. He said he had ordered a private DNA test years ago after finding old letters. The result showed he was my biological father. My mother had invented the affair story during an argument and used it to frighten him. He had kept the test but was afraid to confront her. I turned to Mark and asked if he knew his wedding deposit was supposed to come from an account funded entirely by me. He said Lily told him her parents had sold some property. I handed him the transaction summary, and Lily tried to stop him from reading it, but he moved his chair away. The room was in chaos. My aunts learned that some of the money my mother had borrowed from them for emergencies had gone to pay for Lily's wedding. My cousin learned that my mother had used his address on one of the account forms. Mark learned that Lily had known about the forged signature for years. My mother accused me of setting an ambush, but I presented the final document, an internal review from my father's business. It showed that my mother had redirected client retainers into the account ending in 6789. Over 3 years, more than $60,000 had been removed. Some of the money went to Lily's store, some to personal expenses, and some was unaccounted for. My father finally stood up, removed his wedding ring, and said he would contact an accountant and an attorney the next morning. My mother turned to Lily, asking her to explain, but Lily couldn't speak. Mark asked her directly if she knew the wedding deposit would be taken from me. After a long pause, she whispered, "I knew Beverly usually paid." Mark then said the wedding was postponed until he understood the full extent of the deception. My aunts left with copies of the statements, and my cousin said he would correct the story in the family group chat. Before leaving, I placed my unsent letter on the coffee table. It listed what had been taken, what had been falsified, and the boundaries I was setting. No direct contact, no money, and no access to my home or workplace. Any future communication had to go through legal counsel. My mother tore the letter in half and said I would regret leaving my family. I looked at the empty room and replied, "Blood never meant I had to disappear so you could be comfortable." As Ethan and I walked out, Lily followed us. She asked if there was any way to fix things. I told her apologies were not enough. They were patterns, and hers hadn't changed. The bank completed its investigation first. It confirmed that my signature had been forged on the co-owner request and that the fake email address had been used to impersonate me. Because I had documented everything quickly, several recent payments were reversed, including the $8,600 resort deposit. The older withdrawals became part of a civil claim. My attorney also reopened the issue of my grandmother's trust. The legal process was complicated, but the forged endorsement and hidden records gave us grounds to seek restitution. My mother was interviewed by financial investigators and had to surrender records. The false police complaint made her explanations less believable. My father separated from her within a month and moved into a small apartment. His business suffered as clients learned about the mismanagement of their retainers. He eventually closed the company, sold the equipment, and started negotiating repayment plans. He sent me a 4-page apology letter. I read it once but didn't reply right away. His remorse might have been sincere, but it couldn't make up for the years of silence. Months later, I agreed to meet him with a therapist present. Rebuilding our relationship would depend on his actions, not just his words. Lily's wedding never happened. Mark ended the engagement after discovering more hidden debts. At first, she blamed me publicly, but I didn't respond with insults. I shared a statement with relatives, saying, "I've stopped financial support after finding unauthorized transactions and falsified documents. The matter is being handled legally, and I won't discuss it further." I also attached the bank's confirmation that I was the sole owner of the account. Facts spoke louder than words. Family members who had condemned me started asking my mother questions. She blocked some of them, and others realized she had borrowed money from them using different excuses. Her carefully crafted image collapsed. Without my monthly payments, my mother couldn't maintain the house. She sold it and moved into a smaller apartment, telling everyone I had made her homeless. I reminded myself that losing a house she couldn't afford was not the same as being abandoned. Her health worsened under the stress, but I refused to let her use illness as a tool for control.